What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another Pioneer video, and today we have a super interesting combo deck that ended up taking first place in one of the Pioneer preliminaries. It's basically brand new. It's abusing the new Discover mechanic that we were introduced to into Lost Caverns of Ixalan, and of course we went over it before. We talked about it being essentially like a variant of Cascade and some of the different nuances and stuff. So before we get too deep into that, we'll go over the deck and then we'll get into the match. But real quick, if you are not already subscribed to the channel and you want to support my content, please consider subscribing and the notification bell so you know when the videos get posted. I post a lot of modern or pioneer content along with other essay type videos and stuff, which I have a lot of fun doing. I think they're interesting topics and stuff, interesting things to like hear about and talk about and stuff like that. So again, if that interests you, subscribe to the channel. There's also a link to my Discord server in the description. Go down there, follow it, join up, all that fun stuff. So today we are taking a look at the Quintorius combo deck that we looked at on Tuesday. A real quick refresher, just like normal before we get into the match itself and kind of hope to show off what goes on here. It is based around this card, Quintorius Khan. I'm going to bring up the actual card because like the art is sick, but it's like impossible to read anything on it. So Quintorius Khan is a 5-mana, 4 loyalty planeswalker that says whenever you cast a spell from exile, it deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life. The +1 is to make a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token, but the most important bit on it is -3 to discover 4. So for those that are not privy to what discover means, it's essentially Cascade, but I guess the design behind discover is that you can put this on different spells and different things, and like Cascade, you would always like cast a spell, you would get to Cascade, and then you would get a spell that costs less than the card you cast. And I guess Discover in a ways allows you to cast a spell that maybe costs like 1 or 2 mana, and then you can discover for either the same cost or higher, depending on certain things or certain cards that do that. So kind of like a quick rundown of what Discovery actually does, but in Quintorius Khan's case, it's Discover 4. So it basically means that we can reveal cards until we hit a spell that costs 4 or less, and then we may cast that spell without paying its mana cost, and then the other cards get shuffled back into the bottom of our library, and life goes on. So just like the Cascade decks that you see in Modern, where they're playing, no spells that cost, less than 2, or, but spells that essentially cost like less than 2. Yeah, that's how I want to word it. Cond means that we can only play spells that cost, 4 or really like 5 or higher. And so we have some really neat ways of kind of getting around that. But you are looking for the cards Spark Double and Clever Impersonator. So these are essentially clones that can copy either Planeswalkers or non-land permanents in the case of Clever Impersonator. So with Spark Double, it has this interesting thing where if it copies a legendary creature or Planeswalker, it will essentially keep the copy around and the original around, because Spark Double will not be legendary. So you play Cond, you -4 or -3 to discover 4. You hit a Spark Double comes into play, copies Quintorius Khan. You trigger his static ability because you are casting the card from exile, dealing 2 damage to each opponent and getting 2 life. And then the Spark Double sticks around, you minus the Spark Double, and then you essentially do it all over again. Ideally, you hit all your Spark Doubles before you hit the Clever Impersonators, because then you just deal 20 damage straight up just with the Clever Impersonators. Of course, you're dealing more damage along the way, with Spark Doubles getting to stick around and casting those from exile as well. Basically, you can do a ton of damage this way, and even if you hit the Clever Impersonators first and then Spark Doubles, you end up being able to deal just enough damage to kill someone from a little over 20 life. So that's essentially like what the deck is trying to set up. There are quite a few cards that kind of help you either fix your mana so you can play some more of the expensive removals like Leyline Binding, and even cast some of these adventure cards. So you have Beanstalk Giant, you have Greater Tanuki as like ways to search for lands and put them into play. they both allow. So I guess these, Greater Tanuki allows you to pay 3, discard it, search for a basic land, put on the battlefield tapped. Beanstalk Giant will put into play untapped, a basic land. You have Herd Migration, which you can pay 2 mana and discard it to search for a basic land. You put it to your hand, then you gain 3 life. Ideally, you can play like a Herd Migration to go get a basic, and then the next turn play it, and then Beanstalk Giant or like Greater Tanuki, and put the 4th land into play, and then play a 5th land, play Quintorius on like turn 4. Beanstalk Giant is like in a way where if you set your mana up correctly, you could go get like a basic plains with this, have it come play on tap, be able to leave up Leyline Binding, and do a lot of the same stuff as well. But most importantly, like these cards specifically get around, the being, even though they have an ability that is cheaper than what you could discover for, it does not get discovered. Trumpeting Carnosaur does the same thing. You pay 3 mana, discard it, deal 3 damage to a creature or planeswalker. It can also discover when it enters play. Virtue of Persistence gives a creature -3/-3 until end of turn. You gain 2 life with the adventure part of it, but it costs 7. Cosign to Oblivion is technically a 2 mana card that you can cast, but does not get discovered since its total converted mana cost is 7, and so on. So you kind of get the idea of what we're looking at here. Even though I've obviously just went over a long-winded explanation of it, that's essentially the whole deck and what it's trying to accomplish. You're trying to resolve your Planeswalker and get to all of your impersonators and things like that to end up just dealing a ton of damage, and you have a bunch of expensive cards that like in the late game could end up meaning something to you, but forward your early game plan to kind of set you up for a Quintorius on like turn 4. So that's the deck. Let's go ahead, get over to the matches and stuff. I pre-played the matches and stuff just to hopefully have a little bit smoother of an experience. It ends up being a lot easier that way. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into game 1 of our match. So here we are with game 1 of our match. On the blind against a random opponent. We are on the play. We have Karuga as our companion, which I did not go over in the deck, but you have a companion here that you can play, and of course it just automatically like slots in for free because of like the restriction that we're building around to make our discover like deterministic. So we look at this hand, we have Zagath Triome and we have a Swamp. We have 3 different basic land types for domain. We have a Herd Migration, which is going to allow us to get our 3rd land, and to Beanstalk Giant, which is going to get our 4th land, and we're essentially a land short. We have a little bit of interaction and stuff. We decide that we're going to keep this hand, so we keep, and our opponent ends up mulliganing to 6 cards. We play our Triomes at go. So our opponent goes Razorverge Thicket into Lunarch Veteran. I'm thinking, like, what the heck can this deck even be? I mean, really, I have no clue at this point, like, what they're playing, off the rip. So, I mean, our game plan is going to be virtually pretty simple. I could kill this thing, but I instead opt to go for the land so I can continue to develop mana. To which they play Amalia Benavides Aguirre, which I probably butchered the hell out of that name, but this is the new combo deck that we have seen where you pair this up with one of the other cards that I can like mentally see but can't think of its name. Essentially, this card, whenever you gain life, it explores, and then you destroy all other creatures. Its power is exactly 20. And then you have the other card that I cannot think of course, that essentially, like, when you explore, you gain 3 life and put a counter on it. So then you just get to do it infinitely until this thing becomes a 20 power creature, which then can win the game. So just real quick, we're playing a new deck. They're playing a new deck. So we're just kind of like seeing how things play out. Of course, getting to gain some life from the Herd Migration. So looking pretty good. We just decided to get rid of this thing because, they could just play their creature next turn, and then they have 20 power and we're dead. So, like, we're kind of forced to make that play. They get to play another Lunarch Veteran, and of course they followed up with another Amelia. And they end up finding a Court of Calling. They keep it on top, and our Virtue is not going to be able to kill it. But we do have, Cosign. So this is where I screw up because... few things. I planned on I knew that I wanted to do this. Obviously, the right play was to get a plains so we could actually cast this card next turn. I mean, we had it essentially all wrapped up. Like, this is a plains, play this island, we co-sign this, bounce it. Our opponent still can't attack with this. We go Quintorius Con and we win the game. That was my bad. I believe I even played in a way too where I wanted to Virtue because I wanted to kill the creature that they quartered for, which is going to be the card that escaped my mind. But then I end up like finding out that like this isn't an instant, so I just bounce their creature, and then they end up going and getting another one. So this either telling me that they have another one of the cards in hand, or potentially don't. I guess is what I'm thinking. So here we have some options. I believe I end up taking the route where we get dealt a lot of damage, and me still thinking that this is an instant, which doesn't really like hurt us too much because we have this Trumpeting Source. So we're able to kill the Wild Growth Walker with these, with these triggers on the stack. Our opponent playing a Voice of the Blessed, which is going to get a ton of counters right away. We get attacked, and then now we're kind of hurting, right? But we draw the Herd Migration, kind of get lucky, and we're going to gain a ton of life as well. So we end up getting the plains that we need. We have 4 mana, and then we kind of sit and debate, like, what do we do with these Virtue of Persistence? We could go after these creatures, get 2 power off the board, gain some life. We go up to 17, and we're essentially hoping that they can't find a way to couple together a bunch of damage. But of course, like, they can unearth these or disturb these, whatnot, gain some life, and potentially kill us that way. So we just end up going after this Voice of the Blessed. It gets more power off the board, and it essentially like stops it from growing even bigger. I believe the Sentinel here, it makes map tokens. We're not super worried about it. They get to get more Explore triggers off this. Hit us for 10, or they don't even attack, excuse me. Which I'm not exactly sure why they don't attack there, but it is what it is. So this is like our combo. I know it happened really quick. Tried to stop it sooner, but so we have a Quintorius Con we discover, and then we revealed all these cards essentially. Well, I guess like a Beanstalk Giant and the Spark Double. So then Spark Double will choose to copy this. We minus again. We get to cast another Spark Double, and you kind of see the damage just kind of like stacking up. This here, we did get lucky because we hit all our Spark Doubles before we hit our Clever Impersonators. So now we're going to get to do max damage. I mean, we're going to get to do 10 from this one and, kill them from here. And then, we had another, like, 2 here plus another 10 from that. And then, of course, like, we were going to get to make a 3-2 kind of at the end of this chain. So that's how game 1 went. We got to show off the combo and kind of see like what our opponent is up to in terms of the combo deck that they're playing, which again, this is also new, so really interesting matchup playing out here. But yeah, so that's game 1. Let's go ahead and jump over to game number 2. So here we are for game number 2. We pick Karuga as our companion. We keep this hand on basically a lot of the same merits from the previous game. We have a Herd Migration, we have a Beanstalk Giant, so we have ways to fix our mana. We're going to be able to hit Domain completely. We get to play the Xander's Lounge and then play like a Stomping Ground. That's going to give us essentially 4 types. Herd Migration is going to get us the plains. We can play the plains and then Beanstalk Giant into whatever other basic lands we need, and we kind of have the other land rolled up here, So basically, we're sitting waiting for Quintorius Con. We have a Leyline Binding that we'll be able to cast for 1 mana. We have Clever Impersonator if it ever really gets to that point. We end up getting a second blue mana. We could also cast this Beanstalk Giant after its adventure. It's pretty big body as well. So on. But we end up drawing Ketria Triome, and I end up playing it because then here we could still go get the plains, but we can go, swamp into. We don't have to take 2 damage essentially. We can save a little bit of life. So we get to do this. Pass turn. We can Herd Migration at their end step. So then this will end up getting a plains and will kind of like stop us, I guess, from, or will get us to full domain. Draenith Magistrate is going to be a little tough. Of course, we have Leyline Binding, we have Virtue of Persistence. Like, we're going to be able to deal with this thing. And if that's the only thing that they're doing to kind of stop us, then we're going to be in pretty good shape. But instead, we choose to get rid of it, play the land, pass the turn, and we get to leave up a Leyline Binding, to which our opponent plays Extraction Specialist to get it back. I just decided to binding it now. There is an argument for waiting to bind it, essentially, until we actually have a turn where we can go off. We're not really under too much pressure. We have removal and Virtue of Persistence. We have ramp and Beanstalk Giant. There's a few other things that we could have done there instead of just doing it right away. I wanted to continue to be mana efficient, so that's why I made the decision in the moment. But I can definitely hear an argument, and probably even better to just kind of sit and wait on Leyline Binding until the turn we're ready to go off and just wait to have an extra mana. Or do it on the end step and then untap and do our thing, So that's kind of where my thought process was in it. Instead, I ended up shocking this into play. Beanstalk, we go get a mountain so we can guaranteed cast our Khand when it comes into play. Leave us the option to play the Xander's Lounge as well, which we do end up playing it because we're now just looking to play towards casting these things. Also, peep the Collected Company with only getting a Lunarch veteran, but of course then they get their Amalia, or they drew it, play it, whatever, they find it, so they get in for some damage. This is definitely a clock. I mean, we're at 15 currently at this moment in time. They have 4, 5, 6 power in play, so this is a 3-turn clock, which gets, I guess, doesn't really get lowered. I mean, we go to 13. I mean, I guess gaining life, they play anything, but we're probably going to be dead over 2 turns anyway. So we play this, which means that we get to play our Beanstalk Giant. We kind of got to, at least debate on playing Virtue Persistence over the Beanstalk Giant, but we'd only be getting an Extraction Specialist, and Specialist wouldn't be getting anything back. So it is what it is. Beanstalk Giant gets in front of the Amelia to kind of soak up some damage, but then they end up getting to rally it back, get some more counters, whatnot, and and they would have been able to do Return to the Ranks for either of these anyway. So I guess it would have made maybe better sense to block the Voice of the Blessed, but then they could also just it's even still untap. So I mean, it probably didn't matter. If they were just able to get rid of the whole board, they were going to get rid of the whole board. But as you can kind of see, the problem we drew 2 Clever Impersonators and a Spark Double, which means we would only been able to hit 3 more Spark Doubles in the deck, which obviously is not the best. But I believe with that, we would have Quintorius go get another one. So then we have 2 damage off the first one, 4 damage off the second one, and then 6 damage off the third one. So it's 12 damage. It puts him to 8. And we get a 3/2. We attack, and it kind of threatens some things, I guess, but unfortunately for us, if we drew 1 less of these, it wouldn't have mattered. At that point, as long as there was 1 Clever Impersonator in the deck and our hand looked like this, we could have won with this card right then and there. But of course, we drew a little bit too many. So even if we got to go through our whole deck, we'd essentially just have a board full of Planeswalkers that were just making 3/2s. Which again, unfortunate. But it is what it is. So this deck looked really sweet. But I guess enough rambling from me. Let's go ahead and take this over to the deck screen and kind of get a breakdown, some thoughts, and wrap this whole shindig up, shall we? So what did we learn from the Quintorius Khand combo deck, I guess? For starters, this full art card might be one of my favorite full art cards they've ever made. Just super colorful. Even though it's ungodly hard to look at in terms of trying to read the card, it looks really nice. I actually really love it. So there's that, I suppose. As to actually playing the deck, you are kind of in the same holding pattern as you are with a lot of combo decks. And kind of how you can test how good certain combo decks are is kind of like what plan B is, because a lot of times you're going to be in the waiting room for your combo piece. And for this deck in particular, you are, essentially looking for one piece to kind of get things going because you want the rest of these cards in your deck, right? So you're looking for like one piece. You don't really have a lot of things that give you that card selection to then go and find your combo piece, which I'll admit is a little unfortunate because you kind of are at the mercy of your top deck. You in a way are kind of forced to, or like left wanting to mulligan a little bit more aggressively to find this card, because if you just have this card and you even have like one ramp spell, you're going to be casting it a turn sooner. On turn 4 your opponent's going to have to leave up interaction for it. Of course, it is vulnerable to removal because if you don't have a thing to copy, then you just get to lose your clone and whatnot. So that part sucks. But by and large, I mean, we saw in that game, while our opponent wasn't necessarily interacting with like removal spells or anything, they also had a combo themselves that they were trying to assemble. And just the fact that we had some of these random removal spells that ended up being really good, like Virtue, Persistence, Trumpeting Carnosaur, Cosine, and Oblivion, and Leyline Binding. This deck oddly can interact if it were to be in the mirror, while also being able to interact with other creature combo decks and interact with more aggressive decks, on top of having enough incidental life gain through like herd migration, getting to get basic lands, and Virtue of Persistence as well. And Virtue especially giving you like kind of this tempo where like you can kill a slightly bigger creature and gain some life off of it as well, and then eventually clog up the board with a Beanstalk Giant till you find a Quintorius Con. Like, this deck just kind of does does things pretty well, given the fact that it is built like a Cascade deck, and really a poor Cascade deck to begin with, not in terms of like deck design, but the fact that finding cards that cost 3 or more that are interactive and can be cheaper for what you want them to do is a lot easier than trying to find cards that cost 5 or more and do what they do. But of course, as we see here, it's obviously getting by just fine. Ended up winning, I believe it's a preliminary. I'll have to check the deck list again, but it did win a pretty big event on Magic Online. It's probably a deck that people weren't expecting, and if you don't understand how it works, it can be confusing on how you want to interact with it. But by and large, I kind of like it. Oddly enough, I think I've always been a combo player, and the fact that this is like a one card combo, maybe I would like to see something more to it. Maybe some kind of like draw spells and stuff that are a little bit more expensive. There is like one in particular that I am like completely forgetting, that is from the Return to Ravnica set. So I mean, there's definitely it's like dispersal, summary dispersal. No, that's not it. Whatever the case is, I would like to see some kind of like card selection and stuff like that. Some ways to kind of dig for Quintorius Con instead of being like at the mercy at the top of your deck. Aside from that, I really love playing the deck. It was a lot of fun. It's definitely an interesting take on the of a deck in the Pioneer format, and being a new deck to boot and getting to play against one of the newer creature combo decks in the format as well, just to kind of show this off. It's kind of a nice 2-for-1, and maybe we'll play the other deck too as we kind of let the format develop more and kind of get used to the new meta that is seeming to shape up. So that's the summary. That's my wrap up, thoughts and opinions, all that stuff. That's going to be it for the video as well. If you enjoyed, please leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Of course, ring the notification bell so you know when videos like this and others get posted. On top of that, there's a link in the description down below to the Discord server as well. I would really appreciate it if you went down there, clicked it, join, all that great stuff. Just makes me happy. So yeah, that's going to do it for me. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next one.